Barcelona, 1939. The Spanish Civil War has scarred the city, leaving its streets silent beneath a veil of ash and ruin. Amid the wreckage stands a man, gripped by the weight of an impossible decision. Juan Pujol García is no soldier, yet the rise of Nazi Germany looms over Europe, demanding a choice: flee and survive, or fight and risk everything. Armed with nothing but his wit and a boundless imagination, Pujol begins a journey that will rewrite history. From an unassuming chicken farmer to one of the most cunning spies of all time, he constructs an elaborate web of deception so intricate that even the Nazis are ensnared. As Allied forces prepare for D-Day, Juan Pujol, codenamed Garbo, becomes their secret weapon. His lies shape reality, and his double-agent exploits make him a legend. Born in Barcelona on Valentine's Day, 1912, Pujol grew up far from the hero he would one day become. A boy of boundless creativity, his daydreams often led to trouble, like the time he rode his bicycle straight through a classroom window, lost in his own world. Sent to boarding school at 7, he rebelled against authority, defying both academics and discipline. At 15, he dropped out of school and took a job at a hardware store, later earning a chicken farming certificate. Then came 6 grueling months in Spain's 7th Light Artillery Regiment, an experience that only deepened his hatred of violence. He left the military convinced he was not meant to follow orders or carry a gun. Pujol's business ventures were as turbulent as his life. He invested in movie theaters, each venture failing more spectacularly than the last. By 24, he had returned to chicken farming, engaged to Marguerite, a devout Catholic woman who adored him, but could never truly win his heart. It seemed Pujol was destined for mediocrity, but destiny had other plans. By 1936, Spain was teetering on the brink. King Alfonso XIII had fled 5 years earlier, leaving a power vacuum filled by fascists and communists vying for control. Chaos consumed the nation, and on July 17th, civil war erupted. Blood stained the streets. Bull rings became arenas for executions. Fear was a daily companion. When the Soviet-backed Republicans drafted Pujol, he refused to fight in what he saw as a senseless war between brothers. Hiding at his fiance's house, he dodged the draft. But his defiance had consequences. His mother, sister, and her fiance were arrested, accused of counter-revolutionary activities. Pujol's world came crashing down when just before Christmas, police raided his hideout. Arrested and thrown into a local jail, his future seemed sealed. But fortune favored the bold. A resistance group called Socorro Blanco staged a daring jailbreak, freeing Pujol after just a week behind bars. In the chaos of civil war, Pujol's fiancée, Marguerite, became his lifeline. She orchestrated his escape and secured him a safe house in Barcelona. For a year, he lived in hiding, his world shrinking to the walls of a small flat owned by a taxi driver. When the driver fled the city with his family in 1937, Pujol was left utterly alone. His only human contact came from a young girl who delivered food and whispered updates, and through brief, coded radio conversations with his protectors. Isolation consumed him. Emaciated and depressed, Pujol realized he couldn't survive much longer in Barcelona. He needed to escape Spain altogether. Through the resistance, he obtained forged papers claiming he was too old for military service. But there was a catch. The safest way out was to enlist in the very army he had been hiding from. Reluctantly, Pujol joined the Republican Army and was sent to the front near Mont Blanc. In 1938, under the cover of night, he and 2 others deserted, crossing enemy lines into nationalist territory. The soldiers were captured and sent to a concentration camp in Basque country. Pujol's health deteriorated, but after weeks of captivity, one of his letters reached a family friend. With the right connections, his release was negotiated and he was transferred to a hospital in Burgos to recover. It was there that he met Araceli Gonzalez Carbello, a bold, dark-haired nurse whose charm and ambition matched his own. They fell in love quickly, their bond forming against the backdrop of a crumbling Spain. When the war ended in April 1939, Pujol and Araceli tried to rebuild their lives in Madrid. Desperate for stability, he took a job managing the declining Hotel Majestic. The once grand hotel offered little hope of revival, but it became a stage for Pujol's growing ingenuity. When a Spanish duke staying at the hotel lamented his aunt's lack of Scotch whiskey, Pujol saw an opportunity. He proposed a deal: secure him a passport to Portugal, and he'd ensure the aunts received their prized bottles. The duke agreed, and Pujol finally had the means to leave Spain. The world outside was no haven. By September 1939, war engulfed Europe, and whispers of Nazi atrocities reached Pujol. His father's ideals of liberty and dignity drove him to action. "My humanist convictions would not allow me to turn a blind eye," he later wrote. Hitler, to Pujol, was a demon. He resolved to fight, not with guns, but with his mind. By January 1941, he walked boldly into the British embassy in Madrid, offering his services to MI5. They turned him away, skeptical of the eccentric Spaniard with no spy credentials. Undeterred, Pujol hatched a daring plan. If the British wouldn't hire him, he would prove his worth by infiltrating the Nazis himself. And so, the man who despised extremism set out to become a double agent on his own terms. Juan Pujol García knew nothing about espionage. To fool the Nazis, he would have to transform himself into the perfect agent, a devoted follower of Hitler's vision. Immersing himself in Nazi propaganda, he crafted his persona and boldly called the German embassy in Madrid. Pujol's pro-Nazi pitch was convincing enough to secure a meeting at Café Lion. There, he met Federico, a blue-eyed Abwehr agent who would become his handler. At their second meeting, Pujol was formally recruited, codenamed Arabelle, ironically meaning answered prayer. He received his first assignment: travel to Lisbon to obtain a visa for England. But securing the visa was far from straightforward. After his requests were denied, Pujol spent days wandering hotel bars, desperate for a breakthrough. Fate intervened when he met Señor Salza, a fellow Spaniard carrying a diplomatic visa issued by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Charming Salza, Pujol lured him on a trip to Estoril. While Salza gambled at the casino, Pujol faked an illness, returned to their hotel, and photographed the visa. Using his wit and charm, he convinced engravers and printers to help forge the document. With his masterpiece in hand, Pujol had what he needed to impress the Germans. He returned to Madrid triumphant, claiming he had connections in Britain, eager to broker currency deals. Producing his forged visa as proof, Pujol secured $3,000 in cash, cipher codes, and bottles of invisible ink. His mission? Build a network of spies in Britain and feed intelligence to the Germans. In July 1941, Pujol and his family departed for Lisbon, planning to travel to England. Confident in his achievements, he approached the British consulate, offering his services once again. But the British rejected him outright. Undeterred, Pujol decided it was time to stop pretending to be a spy and fully commit to his role. With nothing more than a map, a tourist guidebook, and British railway timetables, Pujol began fabricating an intricate web of deception. He sent a telegram to his handlers in Madrid, claiming he had reached England and begun building a network of sub-agents. These fictional spies, 27 in total, became his greatest weapon. He wrote elaborate reports filled with made-up details of British military movements, gleaned from newsreels, propaganda flyers, and overheard conversations. His correspondence was convincing enough to fool the Germans, who believed they had an active agent deep within British territory. Pujol's fabricated reports were so detailed that they caused real disruptions. In October 1941, he claimed one of his agents, William Gerbers, had observed 5 British ships leaving Liverpool from Malta. The Germans redirected forces to defend against an attack that never came. Another report about an armada departing Wales had similar effects. Pujol's fabricated armadas were working. German U-boats and Italian planes scrambled to intercept non-existent fleets, wasting time and resources. But he knew this success couldn't last forever. His handler, Federico, began demanding more. Details about new military deployments, agents in Ireland, and intelligence pamphlets from Oxford. Pujol, however, was running out of ideas and making errors that risked exposing him. In one report, he claimed Glaswegians would do anything for a liter of wine, unaware that Scotland's drink of choice was whiskey. In another, he misquoted British currency. These small mistakes, though seemingly trivial, could unravel his operation if scrutinized by the Germans. Meanwhile, his funds were running dry. The $3,000 he had been given was gone, and his allowances barely covered living expenses. Desperate, Pujol approached the British consulate in Lisbon for the 5th time, only to be turned away yet again. Frustrated and panicked, his wife Araceli decided to take action. In a bold move, she wrote a message in invisible ink, claiming to have intelligence about a planned sabotage, and brought it to the American naval attaché. Her gambit worked. MI6 finally took notice of Pujol. Unbeknownst to them, MI6 had already intercepted Pujol's letters to the Germans. The messages, sent by the mysterious agent Arabelle, were perplexing, meticulous, and convincing, but riddled with inaccuracies. As MI6 scrambled to identify the spy, they connected the dots. Arabelle and the eccentric Spaniard offering his services were the same person. In April 1942, the British decided to act. Pujol was smuggled into England via Gibraltar, leaving his wife and young son behind. Upon arrival, he was taken to a safe house in North London and debriefed by MI5. Skeptical of his story, they grilled him for inconsistencies, wary of a Nazi triple agent. To explain his motives, Pujol told a tale of his brother witnessing Gestapo executions in France, a lie that convinced MI5 of his resolve. Recruited into the double-cross system, Pujol, now codenamed Garbo, began working under MI5's counter-espionage operation. His mission? Feed the Germans false intelligence without risking Allied operations. Garbo's early reports consisted of chicken feed, true, but inconsequential information about minor troop movements. Meanwhile, he continued building his imaginary spy network. From a traveling salesman to an Indian poet, his roster grew to 27 fictional agents, each with elaborate backstories. The Germans, completely deceived, even paid salaries for these non-existent operatives, funneling over $340,000 to support the network working for MI5, relieved Pujol of fabricating intelligence entirely on his own. But even with British backing, he faced challenges. When he failed to report on major naval movements, he claimed his subagent had fallen ill and died. To make the story convincing, MI5 published an obituary for the fictional agent and even arranged a pension for his non-existent widow. Garbo's first real tests came with Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. Leaking the operation's details could have jeopardized the entire mission, but Garbo and MI5 devised a brilliant plan. On November 1st, 1942, Pujol sent a letter to the Germans revealing the invasion's targets, Algiers and Casablanca. MI5, however, ensured the letter was delayed by British censors, so it wouldn't reach German hands until after the operation began. On November 8th, Allied forces stormed the beaches. A day later, Pujol's handler, Federico, received the letter. Though it arrived too late to act, the Germans believed Garbo had accurately predicted the invasion. Nazi high command praised him, calling him indispensable and sending him new ciphers and invisible ink. While Garbo thrived professionally, his personal life suffered. In early 1942, Araceli and their son joined him in London, isolated in a foreign country. Unable to speak English, and under MI5's restrictions, she felt trapped. Once a vital partner in Pujol's schemes, she now felt sidelined, watching as her husband's life grew increasingly consumed by his dangerous work. By mid-1943, Araceli's homesickness and frustration had reached a boiling point. Isolated in a foreign country and desperate to return to Spain, she threatened to expose her husband to the Spanish embassy if she wasn't allowed to leave. The situation was critical. Pujol's handler, Tommy Harris, escalated the issue all the way to Winston Churchill's desk. MI5 acted swiftly. They staged a ruse, telling Araceli that Pujol had been arrested because of her threats. An agent even visited her home to collect his belongings, reinforcing the illusion. In a fit of despair, Araceli staged a suicide attempt by opening gas taps in her home, but she was intercepted and sent to Camp 20, a British interrogation center. After a tense confrontation with Pujol, dressed as a prisoner, she was released and promised there would be no further trouble. Though shaken by the episode, Pujol returned to his work. His most critical mission was about to begin. As 1944 approached, the Allies were gearing up for Operation Overlord, the invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. The key to success was surprise. If Hitler's forces concentrated at Normandy, the invasion could be crushed. To prevent this, the Allies launched Operation Fortitude, a massive deception campaign, and Pujol, Agent Garbo, was at its heart. Garbo's mission was to convince the Germans that the invasion would target Pas de Calais, 200 miles north of Normandy. He fed the Abwehr reports from his fictional spy network, detailing a million-man army called the 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG, assembling in southeastern England. The ruse was elaborate. Inflatable tanks, dummy aircraft, and even fake hospitals dotted the countryside. Media reports and staged photographs enhanced the illusion, and General George Patton himself was seen rallying the imaginary forces. For months, Garbo's sub-agents reported troop movements and military preparations, fueling German fears of an attack on Calais. Simultaneously, Allied bombing raids targeted Calais, while leaving Normandy largely untouched, adding credibility to Garbo's reports. By June 1944, Hitler and his high command were convinced the invasion would come at Pas de Calais. On June 6, 1944, D-Day. The Allies landed on the beaches of Normandy. Poor weather had lulled the Germans into complacency, leaving their defenses unprepared. Even as Allied forces stormed ashore, Berlin's high command hesitated, believing the main assault would still come at Calais. Garbo reinforced this belief by sending a message on June 9th, suggesting a second, larger invasion was imminent. This prompted Hitler to halt his panzer divisions from moving to Normandy, buying the Allies critical time to establish a foothold. Garbo's deception didn't end with D-Day. For weeks, he continued feeding the Germans false intelligence, delaying reinforcements and preventing a coordinated counterattack. Even by December 1944, 22 German divisions remained stationed at Pas de Calais, waiting for an invasion that would never come. Thanks to Garbo and other double agents, the Germans were paralyzed by misinformation. Agent Garbo's deception extended far beyond D-Day. For days after the invasion, his fabricated reports continued to delay German reinforcements, ensuring the Allies could establish a foothold in Normandy. By August 1944, as Allied troops marched toward Paris and the Soviets closed in from the east, Pujol's career as a double agent neared its end. The Third Reich was collapsing, with German agents surrendering in droves. Yet Garbo's work wasn't done. Pujol played a crucial role in redirecting Germany's deadly V-1 rocket attacks, saving countless lives in London. The British considered using him against their next adversary, the Soviet Union, but decided the risk was too great. Pujol, fearful his identity would be exposed, knew it was time to disappear. On July 29, 1944, in a bizarre twist, Pujol received the Iron Cross, one of Germany's highest military honors, for his service to the Reich. By Christmas, he was also secretly awarded the Order of the British Empire. This made him the only person in World War II to be honored by both sides. As the war ended, Pujol sent a final message to the Germans, claiming he was fleeing to South America. In June 1945, he traveled to the United States with his MI5 handler, Tommy Harris. After a meeting with FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover, Pujol continued to Venezuela, seeking a new life for his family. Before settling down, he returned to Madrid for one last daring act, meeting his former German handler, Federico. Incredibly, the Germans still believed in his loyalty and even paid him a reward for his service. In Venezuela, Pujol began a quieter life, teaching English and later running a stationery shop. However, his marriage to Araceli could not survive the strain of the war. In 1948, she returned to Spain with their children, unaware of the secret MI5 had spread, that Pujol had died of malaria in Angola. Even Araceli and their children believed he was gone. For over 3 decades, Pujol lived in obscurity. He remarried, had 3 more children, and avoided the spotlight. But in 1984, British historian Nigel West tracked him down, urging him to attend the 40th anniversary of D-Day. Hesitant, but assured the danger had passed, Pujol returned to England. He was formally awarded his MBE and honored at Omaha Beach, where veterans celebrated his heroics. News of Pujol's survival shocked his family in Spain, leading to a poignant reunion at Barcelona's Hotel Majestic. Though decades had been lost, Pujol expressed his love and regret in heartfelt letters to his children. children. On October 10, 1988, he died of a stroke in Venezuela, leaving behind a legacy unlike any other. Juan Pujol García, known as Agent Garbo, remains one of the most successful double agents in history. His idealism, ingenuity, and unwavering commitment to defeating tyranny saved countless lives and changed the course of World War II.